Good afternoon, everybody. This is David Cerns with Haley Marketing Group, and welcome to today's Lunch with Haley webinar. Today is really all about planning for next year, taking a look at some of the big challenges that are happening in the staffing industry, from affordable care to the increasing talent shortages and just other ideas of how to make the next 12 months one of your company's best years ever. So we have a lot of ground to cover today. Let's jump right in and get started with just an overview of what we're going to do. So today's agenda, we are going to talk about some of the big issues going on in the industry right now and the things that you can do to address them. We're going to talk about growth and some of the basic business strategies. We're going to talk about 11 fundamental strategies and one of my dad's favorite lessons about how to grow in a recession or in a growing economy. We're going to talk more about recruiting and get into some specific ideas about how to make your current recruitment marketing for active job seekers even more effective. And then in preparation for today's webinar, I asked the people on our team to share their best ideas for what to do for 2014, and they provided tons of great ideas. So we're going to share all of those ideas during the next 59 minutes. During the course of the webinar, if you have questions, please feel free to ask them. And if you're a fan of live tweeting, jump on Twitter. Our hashtag is #LunchWithHaley. And so please share the insights that you're hearing, share questions, and we have a team of people ready to help answer online as well. Okay, let's get right in, and let's take a look at some of the issues that are going on right now in the staffing industry and the impact that it's having on your business. And to quote the, what was it, the 1996 presidential elections, when it was the economy stupid, might even have been the 1992 presidential election. But to quote the famous line, is the economy stupid? And really that is still the biggest issue today. We are seeing really based on the numbers from staffing industry analysts and American Staffing Association, the best data ever for the staffing industry. We have just reached record market penetration for staffing. Yet the economy as a whole still is not doing all that well. It's up, it's down, which has been very good for staffing. Very happy to see that our Congress has decided maybe to get their act together and try to fund our government for at least 2 more years. But who knows what the Fed's going to do and what they're going to do with the quantitative easing that they've been doing to try to keep the money flow stable and our interest rates extremely low. If they decide to change their policies, we could see a major impact on interest rates, and that could have a huge impact on the global economy. For those of us in the staffing industry, we would just love to see more uncertainty. Boom growth, as many of you know, is great for staffing in the short run because you see tons of use of temporary help, but in the longer term, it is not as strong for our business as uncertainty is. We like it when people have a strong demand for flexibility, and that's the value we want to keep selling in 2014. However, a little more improvement in the economy is good. We'd like to see even a little more demand for direct hire, although most people I know in the executive recruiting world are busier than they've ever been because we're getting to the point where good talent is so hard to find. Which kind of brings us to our second challenge, which is the talent shortages that we're seeing, from nursing to light industrial to high-level professionals, and certainly in the world of technology. We are seeing increasing reports of severe talent shortages. And while I think the numbers, was yesterday or today, said that unemployment claims shot back up last week, we're still hearing from almost all of our clients it's getting harder and harder to find talent. And because of the nature of the last 4 years in the industry, since the real collapse in 2009, we haven't had to be as strong of a recruiter as we had to be before that. And some of the people in our offices aren't as good at recruiting as they used to be. We're pretty much, you could rely on almost any recruiting channel and it would bring you enough talent to fill the job orders. Many of you on today's call can remember lots of times when you had job orders going unfilled because you couldn't find anyone to fill them. And that's very painful to your profitability, and that's something we may be heading back towards in 2014. And the tools that we've become accustomed to relying on, particularly the job boards, aren't producing the volume or quantity of candidates that they once did. And so now we need new strategies next year to deal with these talent shortages to make sure we don't have unfilled job orders. And lastly, and certainly not least, the Affordable Care Act. I know everybody on today's call was very relieved when we got a one-year delay on the penalty phase of the implementation, but you still got to start tracking data in just a couple of weeks. You still got to start working out what's going to be your look-back period, and for most people it's going to be 12 months. And we still don't know the full impact that this law is going to have on the American economy. If you listen to the Democratic Party right now, you're hearing that this is saving people tons of money, an average of $2,500 per household. If you're listening to the Republicans, costs are skyrocketing for everyone. And now affordable health care is no longer going to be affordable, and it's going to be this huge pressure on both individual consumers and businesses. One way or the other, we're going to see an impact on the economy for all of us in the staffing world. Hopefully it'll just mean more uncertainty and not too much financial pain, but we do have to be aware of how to leverage the Affordable Care Act to our best advantage over the next 12 months. All right, so let's jump in. I think all of those issues are things everybody on today's call knows about, which is why I didn't spend too much time talking about them. But let's talk about how can you really drive growth in your business next year. So I promised some advice from my dad. And one of my dad's favorite expressions when I was growing up, regardless of the economy, and he ran a staffing company from the late 60s through the late 90s, make the economy the other guy's problem. If you run an independent staffing firm or a regional staffing firm, if you are a branch manager in an office in a specific city, the global economy is not really your concern. Your concern is what's happening in your community and what are your competitors doing and how are you going to beat your competitors. Because you don't have to beat the economy. You just have to beat the competition. So how can you make the economy the other guy's problems? Well, here are 4 ways. Number 1, win those local battles. Even in the worst downturns, even in 2009, when the staffing industry fell by more than 30%, that still meant nearly 70% of all the temporary business was still out there, and it had to go to somebody. How do you win that business? Well, according to the study that Innovero did this year, the most important thing you can do is be more responsive than the competition. Follow up faster. Get in touch with people more quickly. Do a better job of responding to customers' needs, not just the first response, but also being able to provide talent. So you have to build an organization focused on speed of response and quality of recruiting. You have to be better at recruiting certain types of people. Maybe it'll mean that you won't recruit for as broad a range of job disciplines because some of them are so hard and so distracting, you can't recruit what you're good at for the core. But if you're going to be the company that consistently wins the local battles, you have to be faster and better at recruiting, and that usually comes from how your business is structured and how focused you are in your recruiting efforts. Now, the second strategy for making the economy the other guy's problem is to simply out-hustle the competition, and that's what we saw a lot of in 2009. The companies that got more aggressive about making sales calls, continuing to invest in marketing, and even doing more recruiting so that every job order they found they could fill, those were the companies that fell the least due to the downturn. We had some clients that actually had no loss of revenue during 2009. And even those that did, the companies that made a serious commitment to ongoing marketing, even when their clients were saying we don't have a need, those were the companies that recovered the fastest and recovered the strongest. So right now we're not facing that downturn. We're facing what's more likely an upturn. But if you want the economy to be other guys' problem, still think the same way. How do I out-hustle the competition to find the talent, to respond to the client, to fill the job order, because those are the staffing companies that are going to win next year. Third opportunity is to be more creative in your sales approach. If you ask most staffing firms, how do you market your services? The answer you're going to get is we have salespeople who knock on doors or make cold calls or network or canvas on LinkedIn. There are 10,000 plus staffing firms. There are 50,000 recruiters. Almost all of them are using the same techniques for business development. And if everybody's doing the same thing, the probability of it being very effective is pretty slim. So even though you keep hearing about marketing, switching over to social media and how you should be using social media and inbound marketing, a lot of staffing companies are not being very creative in what they're doing. And this year in 2014, you're going to have to be more creative in your approach. And when we get to the recommendations from our team, we'll show you lots of ideas to help you be more creative. And lastly, defend your turf. This coming year, when business is good and candidates are more scarce, means you're going to have a harder time filling job openings. When you can't fill the job opening, you open the door to your competitor. So the best thing you can do is really deepen those client relationships. Build a stronger network of contacts in your client companies so that if you happen to have a job order you can't fill, you're not going to lose the relationship with the employer. You're not going to lose the ongoing business. So if you do those 4 things, winning local battles, out-hustling the competition, being different and more creative in selling, and doing a good job of strengthening your relationships, defending your turf, you will make the economy the other guy's problem, whether it goes up or down. Now, we're going to transition and talk about from a strategy 101, the kind of stuff I learned in business school, how do you grow your staffing company? And let's talk about basic strategies for organic growth. So the simple strategy number 1 is increase market share. Get more local companies to do business with our firm. That can be done by just being more aggressive about prospecting. That can be done by focusing on a new market segment where you're taking the same services you sell today, but maybe to a customer base, maybe a larger company, maybe smaller companies, maybe a different part of town, where you are able to grow revenues with new clients. And maybe it's just taking more business from the competition. Second organic growth strategy is to increase client share, which means getting a larger percentage of each client's business by being a more strategic partner to those clients, by doing a better job and being more proactive at account management, helping them to better plan their staffing needs so you've got the first shot at filling them. By getting them to see new ways to use temporary staffing and direct hire recruiting services in their organizations to drive their business's growth. By getting them to be more strategic and expanding the amount they spend on staffing, you can increase your client share. Some companies I know will offer incentives to either be a first call or to be an exclusive vendor. Other companies, which you're going to get to one of the more advanced strategies, will move up the value chain to manage the entire staffing function for their clients, so therefore they are able to get a larger share. Third organic growth strategy is geographic expansion. And geographic expansion can be a second office across town, or it may be pursuing another market where you may have an opportunity either because it's regionally close and you can manage it, or I've seen lots of examples of staffing companies who had key team members leave, maybe because a spouse moved to another city, and they'll build around that team member in another market. And the last idea on the list here, follow the client, is an extension of geographic expansion where you go to a new market and you set up shop in conjunction with a key client that has offices in another city. You may start by working out of their office and being their local on-site and then growing that into more of a retail business in that city. And the last one is service line extension, which can mean getting into new job disciplines or getting into new types of services. I'll talk about a couple of those in a minute, but the biggest one you're reading about frequently is the whole world of online staffing. As companies are saying, hey, if I can deliver staffing through the traditional, I send an outside salesperson out and I have a recruiter fill the job, well, how can we migrate to a model that's more like an Odesk or an Elance where it's all done on the internet, where essentially those firms have disintermediated the staffing company and allowed the employer and job seeker to directly connect with them only handling the back-end paperwork. There may be ways to look at new types of services as opposed to just looking at new disciplines to extend your services. Moving on to some other basic strategies. I've been reading, and I think the last issue of SI Review is all about mergers and acquisitions, M&A. Clearly, M&A is a fast road to growth. I participate in an organization called the Center for Entrepreneurial Leadership here in Western New York. And I was on a panel with a group of other local professionals, one of whom was an M&A consultant. And he said to his clients, he recommends consistently that the most effective way and the fastest way to grow is through strategic acquisition, finding out ways to take out a key competitor by acquiring their business, jumping into a new market or a new discipline where you don't want to build those skills from scratch, you can just buy them and add them to your business mix. Or acquiring a business because it builds on either your skill set or your resources so that maybe you can take on larger accounts or a new type of client. By looking for that strategic purchase, you're able to essentially pay for the cost of the acquisition through accelerated growth in both your business and the company you acquired. It's kind of a 1 + 1 = 3, which is the same concept behind a strategic merger. A merger just means you're putting the two organizations together. This time you're not buying out the other staffing company. You are simply merging operations and looking to find synergies that enable the two organizations to be greater than the sum of their parts. So maybe because you've got complementary services and now you can go win more client share from every customer. Or maybe it gives you the resources to start doing on-site programs or MSP services. The next idea is one that was very popular in the 1990s, and it's totally dependent on the IPO market. Now, I'm not an M&A guy, so I'm not that familiar with the state of the IPO market today, but a roll-up is where you partner with somebody with some serious dollars. The idea being is you buy multiple staffing companies that are of usually similar disciplines, so clerical or industrial or IT, and then you build the organization up to a sufficient size where you can then take it public. Because private equity multiples are lower than public equity multiples, when you convert, there's a big cash out for everybody involved in the roll-up. But again, if the IPO market is strong, that's a great strategy. When the IPO market is weak, as it has been for most of the 2000s and even late 1990s, roll-up isn't the best M&A strategy unless it's part of a strategic acquisition or strategic merger where you're trying to build a large company and maybe then sell it to an even larger company. And the last M&A strategy is local market dominance. And this is if you're a staffing company that plays in a lot of government contracts or RFP situations where you want to be not just the primary vendor, but maybe you want to win the number 1, the number 2, and the number 3 slots when they award contracts to multiple vendors. Local market dominance means you start or buy multiple companies in the same geographic market with the aim of winning a much larger client share of companies that use multiple vendors. But you're not doing it under one brand name because those employers won't work with just one vendor. You want to own as many of the different slots as you can. And I've seen that particular strategy work very well where each of the local companies, they let the branch manager be an equity partner so that they'd have a stake in growing their businesses. Each of the branches in the local market did compete with one another, but when they went after the major accounts, they could effectively partner together to win the really big business in the community. And the last of the basic strategies are to look at ways to horizontally or vertically integrate, essentially moving up the value chain to provide higher level services to your clients. Now in the 1990s, staffing companies went from traditional transactional temp help to starting to provide on-site, and some people did it in the 80s. During the 2000s, that has become the MSP, the Master Service Provider relationship, where you actually go in and manage the staffing function for a client. Now, for many of the people on today's call, the typical MSP buyer is a very large user of staffing, and it's not going to be feasible for a small to mid-sized staffing company to take on an MSP relationship with a large user of staffing. However, most small to mid-sized users of staffing don't have a very sophisticated staffing management process in-house, and they don't have anybody to manage it. So there may be opportunities to move up the value chain and more strategically manage staffing for your clients without having to graduate all the way to being that MSP level relationship. I know I've talked to a couple of companies who are looking at the world of VMS and saying, how can we maybe even provide better staffing management tools, a VMS-like solution to help our clients manage their staffing function, but where we can control the spending chain on behalf of our clients. We're adding more value, we're getting a larger share of their staffing, we're also able to educate them about the value of staffing, and we can go up in the value chain and earn more revenues by providing more strategic, more consultative, more partnership level services. And lastly is just look at what are other related services do your clients need that are related to hiring. That could be HR consulting, could be outplacement, could be assessment testing. This is a great time to do two things. Number one, talk to your clients and find out, all right, their business is picking up. They're busy. They're afraid to hire. Where do they need help hiring and managing talent, onboarding, retention? Where do they need help? Also to look at the world of HR technology. If you follow websites like ERE, there are new technologies written about almost every day. As a staffing company, you want to be on top of these tools. Some of them are replacements for what you do, so you need to be aware of the competitive threats. Some of them could augment your services or enhance your services and provide you with new revenue streams. One of our clients, a company called Pivot, they actually partner with staffing companies to help provide more holistic workforce management solutions to manage the entire employment life cycle. So check out pivotcompanies.com to get an idea of other things that you could be doing for your clients. Kind of to wrap up the basic strategies, I want to talk about where our clients did the best in 2009. And if you look at the companies that recovered the strongest and the fastest, this is how they did it. And even though we're kind of in the inverse of that situation, these same strategies make absolutely as much sense today as they did back then. Number one is to batten down the hatches. Just really evaluate your expenses and minimize things that are non-essential. When you get busy, there's a tendency to spend more money without paying attention to where the money is going. Staffing is such a competitive business as we can't afford to have waste, so you're looking for any way to cut the waste. You're looking to manage results and people more closely to make sure there's a positive return on investment and to cut those non-producing assets as quickly as you can. Bigger companies may look to divest, to actually dump weaker business units and put more of the resource they have into the areas that are growing faster rather than trying to shore up the weaker areas. Now, the next thing to do is be more targeted and more aggressive in marketing. That really means attacking your website, your local market more strategically. And I started to say with the first thing on the list, through your website. If your website's more than a few years old, it's out of date. You really need a website that serves as a hub for attracting people, disseminating information, and converting employers and job seekers into paying customers and placed candidates. You need to be much more aggressive about online marketing. Just one of our clients shared with me a great stat that 54% of the companies that engage in inbound and content marketing, excuse me, I got that backwards. Companies that engage in inbound and content marketing generate 54% more sales leads than companies that rely on sales alone. And to add that 54% more leads is much less expensive than just adding more salespeople. You want to be more involved in your local market so you're more visible, so people see you, think of you, trust you because of familiarity. You want to use low-pressure outbound marketing that's highly targeted. You want to pick the companies you want to do business with, and you want to go after those businesses with a specific plan of why they should work with you. And then you're going to use direct marketing, not just direct sales, but direct marketing to get their attention, integrated with the sales to get them to have a meeting and to get them to see the unique value you can bring to their business. And you want to do more local market branding, just things that keep your name in front of people as cost effectively as possible. Again, familiarity breeds trust. The more local market branding you're doing, the more familiarity you create. And lastly, some of our clients in 2009 looked at service line extensions and said the industry segment they were in was going to have a prolonged downturn, so they looked after some of the hotter sectors and industries. I looked at the last report from staffing industry analysts, and right now the segments of the staffing industry that are currently at peak are light industrial, locum tenens, engineering, marketing and creative, and education. Those are the ones right now that are at their peak levels and still growing. The ones that are really below are ones that some of them in 2009 were really hot. Clerical is below, travel nursing, per diem nursing, accounting and finance, legal and direct hire are still well below peak levels, which could mean one of two things. If the economy continues to boom, those areas are likely to pick up. If the economy continues to be uncertain, those areas are likely to remain laggards behind the ones that are strong. So if you're in these segments that are weaker, it may be time to look for a service line extension. And lastly, where should you focus your efforts next year? Number one, build a moat. In other words, make it harder for business to be taken from you. Deepen your client relationships. Get more proactive about managing workforce plans for your clients. Move up that value chain so that you're more in control of their timing and hiring needs. Build and maintain a database of the job descriptions your clients have, so when they need something, they don't have to think about creating a JO. You've already got the information for the job order. Automate the requisition process. If your staffing software facilitates it, make it easy for them to order online. So they can just jump in, pick an order out of a database, and submit it to you right through your website. Tie in features like online timekeeping, billing, and reporting so they are very tied into working with you, and that the easiest possible course of action is to continue to use your services. Next thing is broaden your client roster. If you've got 2 clients today, get to 5. If you've got 100, get to 200. If you've got 500, get to 700. The more clients you have, not only do you have growth, but the less business risk you have from the loss of any one client. During the boom mid-2000s, we worked with a company down in Texas that had more than 90% of their business in 2 companies. Within 6 months' time, both those companies made major changes in staffing. They lost both clients. They could not stay in business with the loss of just 2 clients, even in a peak time in the staffing industry, because they were so focused on those big clients, they didn't put any resources into broadening their client roster. And lastly, as you've heard me say a couple times, and I'm going to repeat again, improve recruiting. For that hard-to-find talent, make sure every order you get gets filled. Enable your firm to fill orders faster. Become known as a go-to specialist for certain types of people. And I'm going to mention in a little bit of how to find those kinds of people, but the more you can be known for being able to find certain kinds of hard-to-find talent, the better it's going to be for your business. Speaking of which, let's jump over and talk about some of those strategies for recruiting. What are some of the things you can do to recruit active talent? Now, for any of the executive recruiters on today's call, I understand most of what you're doing is about finding the passive candidate, doing the hard work to find talent your clients can't find. This next little section is not for you. This is really about the staffing companies that are using their websites, that are using the job boards, that are using aggregators and attempting to use social media to attract talent. These are some specific ideas on how to get more results from what you're already doing. So number 1, your job posts on your website absolutely must be optimized for search engines. What does that mean? From a search engine perspective, you want to have the title of the job be right in the URL. So you see an orange box on screen where it says jobs.smithhanley.com, and then right after that, advertising account supervisor jobs in Des Moines, Iowa. The title of the job and the location are part of the URL. When Google figures out if something is relevant for a search, one of the key pieces of information Google looks at is the URL. So if you've got the title of your jobs in the URLs of each individual job post, the better it's going to be for SEO. Another thing is you see the page title, and this blue bar it's called the page title, and we have a page title, Advertising Account Supervisor Jobs in Des Moines, Iowa, Marketing Job Recruiters. Now, Smith Hanley is a recruiting firm. They recruit for a variety of positions, but when you're searching this job, the page title talks about Marketing Job Recruiters, and we're using keywords in the page title. So from an SEO perspective, you want your job posts to have that title and location in the URL, a page title with keywords, a meta description, so if it comes up in a Google search, the description makes sense to a human being and it makes them want to click on that listing and come back to your job board. And most importantly, the jobs must really be on your website. If you have jobs iframed on your site and they're in your applicant tracking software, but the URL's not really your website, that does nothing for search engine optimization, and you are losing out on a ton of web traffic. We upgraded our job board tool, and the picture you see on the screen is from our job board. We upgraded our job board just about a year ago to add all of these SEO characteristics into each individual job post. The weekend we took these changes live, our clients saw a 30% increase in traffic to their jobs from simply optimizing the individual jobs. That's a huge amount of traffic, and our clients in the last month saw more than 2 million visitors to their websites. So a 30% increase in traffic in one weekend is pretty enormous, and it's done from simply having optimized job posts. But optimizing for SEO isn't the only optimization. I've been talking to a lot of our clients about how to optimize for aggregators. Indeed, Simply Hired. When you write a job description, maybe it's for a very mundane job like forklift driver. And if that's the only title you use as the job, that job may go from you into Simply Hired. Once it's on Simply Hired, there may be 50 other forklift driver jobs in your community that all show up in a list. Why would the candidate pick yours out of the list? That title is your headline, your marketing cue to the person reading the job aggregator. Add words in. Now, here you're not worried about keywords as much as you're worried about words that are interesting to humans. Things like forklift driver, our best paying forklift job, or forklift driver, one of the area's best employers. Putting some words and phrases around the job title so that when the job aggregator picks it up, it stands out in their list will do a lot more to increase response from Indeed, from Simply Hired, and any other job aggregators that you use. And related to that, you also want to make sure you're maximizing distribution of your jobs. They should automatically be feeding out to the job aggregators every day. Indeed, Simply Hired, Glassdoor. They should be integrated with and feeding to social media so that as you are posting things to your website, they're automatically getting shared where it makes sense and they're manually getting shared where it makes sense. And I will talk more about that in just a minute, but the idea is that you're going to build a base of social followers who are interested in the kinds of jobs you share. And when we talk about social, we also want to talk about how to do more things to get those people wanting to pay attention to all of your messages so they'll see your jobs more, which I will cover in just one moment. The next thing is to look to build a talent community and nurture relationships with those people. Talent community is your candidate database. It's all of the people you'd love to stay in touch with. You know, flag everybody in your staffing software who you would use again, and build an email list where you email them not just here's our latest hot jobs, but you email them stuff that's genuinely useful and interesting. Please, not just here's the latest advice on how to interview for a job. They've seen that 12,000 times. They're not interested in it. Be human. Show off your company's personality. Engage them in conversations. Share stuff they'd really find interesting. Maybe it's about events happening in town. Maybe it's about a great and touching story about somebody you put to work. Maybe it's some real advice about how they can get a raise. The more you share useful and interesting content with your talent community, the more they pay attention to your messages, the more they want to work for you, and the more they will refer people to you. Then when you push those job openings out to them, which can be done through both automated emails from your job board and manually through email marketing, you can be advertising those jobs and encouraging people to reactivate themselves and refer friends, and you will get a much higher response from a talent community than when you just email blast your candidate list. The key is to be selective about what you share and be relevant in the information you provide. Make sure that you offer a mobile search and apply and make it easy to use. There's been a tremendous spike in the use of staffing websites by mobile job seekers. Indeed and Simply Hired are reporting more than 30% of all their traffic comes from people using mobile devices, and the majority of that is people on smartphones. Check out your website on your phone. What does your job board look like? Can you search the jobs at all? Is it usable? You want to have an interface where it's easy to search the jobs, it's easy for someone to review the jobs, and like the example you see on screen here, people can realistically apply right from a phone by clicking a button like Apply with LinkedIn or Apply with Indeed. So there's not a lot of information that they have to fill in on their phone because they're not going to type their whole resume in online when on the phone. And if you can't create a simple application process on the phone, at least create an emailing capability so they can forward the email to themselves with that job to then go apply when they get home. And lastly, in terms of social, I'm going to come back to some of the points I started to make. Maximize your social reach. Every job you have should automatically be shared every day on Twitter. You should manually and selectively share jobs on Facebook and LinkedIn and Google+. The idea is you don't want to overwhelm the people who follow you, particularly on Facebook and also on LinkedIn, with every single job. They'll get really sick of you and they will unfriend you or they will disconnect from you on LinkedIn. But if you're doing it selectively and you're sharing great content, you can get tremendous response from social media. One of our clients in Dallas, Texas, first thing was they built a very sizable following on Facebook, around 6,000 people, and now they are able to fairly effectively recruit using Facebook as a tool to share job openings and effectively selling the opportunity, not just here's a list of the requirements, and then encouraging people to apply and to refer others. But when using social media, don't make it just about jobs. Just like I mentioned before about sharing relevant content, in social it's really important that you engage your audience with stuff they find interesting. They want to see that you have a personality. They want to see that you're the kind of company they want to work for. So share information about your firm that they'll find valuable, but that they'll find interesting. I hope you'll find it interesting, but we're working today on our holiday card that's going to go to all of you. We had a very fun Ugly Sweater Day earlier this week, and we have some great pictures, and we use that to create a very fun Season's Greetings card that you'll be receiving. Why do we do that? Because we want to show off a little personality so that when you think of Haley Marketing Group, hopefully you'll think of, hey, these are kind of people that I'd hang out with, that I'd like to work with, and that I also respect for their ideas. A friend of mine who's a graduate from the Wharton School just wrote a book called The Human Brand. And in his book, he talks about two primary characteristics of successful brands, having warmth and having competence. Competence means you're good at your job, and that's what most staffing companies focus on in their sales efforts is how can I be really competent at our recruiting and at our placement and the quality candidates. But that warmth piece is just as important. And we do focus on warmth when we try to build relationships with employers. But sometimes, particularly when there's a lot of candidates looking for work, our ability to demonstrate warmth to our candidates isn't that great. And we need to work on how can we show more warmth to our candidates as well as the competence so that they trust us to help them with their job search, which will get, again, a bigger social network, more sharing, which ultimately means more jobs getting filled and jobs getting filled faster. All right, moving on to the Affordable Care Act. And I absolutely promise I will not talk about the details of the Affordable Care Act at all. ASA does a great job with that, and Staffing Industry Analyst does a great job with that, and Assurance and Essential Staff Care. They can give you tons of information about the Affordable Care Act and the impact on your business. Now I want to talk about how it impacts your sales. The idea is you want to become a go-to resource, the local expert on affordable care. I saw a stat, I think just 2 days ago, that more than 50% of employers still don't fully understand the impact of affordable care on their businesses. They're looking for someone who can help translate this changing regulation into something they know how to take action on. They're getting advice from all kinds of places. You're a staffing expert. If you bring that knowledge to them, they will trust you. They will believe what you're sharing, and they will really appreciate that you can help them solve a problem. Even though you're not selling them staffing services, you're positioning yourself as someone who really understands staffing and employment issues. Go to the websites of the experts, get their information, partner with them, ask to use their information, and then turn it into handouts or emails or links that you share on social media. Translate what you know about affordable care into the information your clients really need to know. Provide them with more resources. The more you share useful information that helps others, the more they want to turn around and help you by doing business with you. This comes to a core philosophy we've had at Haley Marketing Group since we started in 1996. The relationship with a client is much like a bank account. You have to make deposits before you can make a withdrawal. The more you become a local expert, you give away ideas, the more you're making deposits that enable you to be the company that ultimately gets the sale, that makes the withdrawal when that employer needs staffing assistance. The other thing I would do is I would fill my website with content related to ACA, so in my local community I can become a top go-to destination for information for small to mid-sized businesses on how to understand the Affordable Care Act. Next, focused on cost savings of staffing. Your healthcare costs are probably cheaper, and using temps is always cheaper than using full-time employees. Remind people that staffing firms are the employer of record and for the temps and payrolled workers, and anybody who's on your payroll lessens their impact from affordable care. Also, because you're in the temporary staffing business, you get to leverage the cost of affordable care over a much larger client base, a much larger number of work hours, much larger candidate base. A lot of those candidates aren't eligible for coverage. So your effective cost per hour for health coverage is probably lower than your client's effective cost per hour, which gives you then a cost advantage when they're using a temp versus having to bring somebody in on their own payroll. So you're going to need to do the math to really look at what's going to be the impact on your hourly rate because of ACA versus what's the likely impact of if an employer hired directly. And you may find that your cost advantage is even greater because of Affordable Care than it was before it. And of course, continue to sell the value of staffing. Staffing is still a huge ROI service. Sell the cost savings from flexible staffing, the fact that people can cut overtime expenses. They can avoid the extremely high cost of overstaffing, of having people sitting around without having things to do, or of having unfilled orders in their own business because they don't have the capacity to get things done. Sell your ability to provide risk management, whether it's compliance with Affordable Care or other employment laws, helping to just manage turnover more effectively. Focus on your ability to deliver better risk management through the use of temporaries. Sell productivity improvement, how you can improve efficiency, how you can eliminate capacity constraints, how you can decrease burnout, which results in excessive costs for scrap and rework, because you're providing temps to supplement their workforce. And sell your access to talent. The fact that it's getting harder to find people means that your clients need you more than ever to do the hard work to use all these various tools, from the job boards to the aggregators to social media to direct recruiting, to go out and find the talent they need. It's incredibly difficult for them to do it on their own, and you can show the value of hiring the right person far exceeds whatever you would charge as a placement fee. You just need to show your clients the math of that scenario to get them to really appreciate using your services is a bargain when they find the right employee. And now it's time to turn from some advice that I've been sharing to advice from our team. So in preparation for today's webinar, I asked everybody at Haley Marketing Group to share their thoughts as to some of the ways that all of you could be most successful in 2014. Now, with apologies to some of the Haley Marketing Group team members to avoid too much redundancy, not everybody made the final cut, but we do have advice from a lot of people. So let's go through and see what our team had to say. All right, first up is from Brad Smith, our Director of SEO and Social Media. And he, number one, said budget appropriately. Many of you may not be aware that the staffing industry under budgets for sales and marketing tremendously, particularly marketing. The average industry spend is 0.25%, and that's really, for most firms, not going to be enough dollars to make a significant impact. You're better to do nothing than to invest foolishly. But if you invest wisely, it can make your sales efforts so much more productive. And how do you invest wisely? Brad's second tip is better tracking. Smart business decisions are not made by guessing, and once you invest in marketing or in salespeople, then you really need to track. You can use analytics to see what's happening online, and then you can look at your sales results to see what's really happening bottom line, to figure out what tools are driving the best results, and then continue to invest more in the things that are working while divesting the things that do not. Integrate sales and marketing. Neither works best in isolation. And to make sure you get the highest return on your sales team's time and effort, or the highest return on your marketing, you really need to integrate the two things together by mapping out the things you're doing in marketing, the things you're doing in sales, how they interact, then training your sales team how to use the tools, when to make follow-up calls, what to say, and what to do after their calls, so that you can create a systematic process for selling and nurturing relationships that gives you the greatest probability of closing business and keeps you top of mind. And then reinforce that training over and over again to ensure buy-in and make sure your salespeople are using the tools. Profile your target audience. Really understand who you're trying to reach and how you're going to reach them. Know your clients, know your candidates, but understand it not from your desire to sell to them, but from their perspective of how they look at their job and their world, what challenges they have, what interests. You need to communicate with them in ways that talk about their needs and their interests. And it's that profile, it's the starting point. And then once you have that profile done and you know how to communicate with them, then you surround people. One tactic in isolation really works. If you're just picking up the phone and cold calling, it's not going to be enough. You want to surround people. You want to direct market. You want to directly call. You want to use social media. You want to use email. You want to use events, so that wherever your clients are, wherever your prospects are, wherever your candidates are, they perceive that you're everywhere, even though you're only very strategically investing so that you show up in the places that they are looking. That is the best way to differentiate your firm and keep yourself top of mind. And thank you, Brad, for those tips. Next up is Matt, one of our marketing advisors and our director of marketing here at Haley Marketing. Matt suggested that you really look at the forecast demand, looking at tools maybe like Wanted Analytics that can help you project the strongest demand areas in your local community in terms of specific employers, job titles. The more you can know what's going to happen in terms of hiring, the more you can plan for it by developing a proactive recruiting plan to engage in-demand talent, and then as you bring those people in, then turn around and skill market them back to employers to build your client base. Likewise, Matt's recommendation was to focus. Identify the areas that are most important for 2014. Pick 3 to 5 objectives, no more than that, that you can really concentrate your resources on. If you spread yourself too thin over too many objectives, they won't get done. The more targeted you are, the more you're going to succeed. And like Brad said, you also need to make sure that you have realistic budgets to accomplish those goals. From Linda. Linda is one of our creative designers, and her first recommendation was to proactively differentiate, to determine what really sets you apart. A lot of staffing companies will say it's our service, it's our responsiveness, it's the quality of the candidates. Well, get out and talk to your clients. See the specific aspects of your service, your candidates that they appreciate. What really does make you different? Once you've determined those things, communicate with people with a clear and consistent marketing plan, and communicate your message across multiple platforms. And just like Brad said about surrounding people, Linda's reinforcing that your differentiation has to surround people with a very consistent message. And Linda's last point was, that's really kind of 101 marketing, but we see so many companies come to us where that consistency is lacking. And a lot of times it was budget decisions. They try to save a little money, so they're reusing old marketing materials, or they don't want to update their website even though their whole company message has changed. Without consistency, you're kind of going to be known for your weakest factor. Kind of relates to, and I love this second point, don't become part of the sludge. If consistent branding communication is missed, especially next year as people are going to be very aggressive about selling and recruiting, then you become part of the Me Too staffing industry. You become part of having to fight for every nickel of margin and fighting the price players and working way too hard to retain your clients. All right, next up is Ryan, part of our sales team. And his first advice was to educate. Teach your clients to be better consumers of your services. Get them to see ways to use staffing more strategically. Help them to be more proactive about hiring so they're not waiting to the last minute. And show them the financial benefit of your services and how you actually save them money. A lot of companies think staffing is a luxury. You know it's an essential business tool. And we often think, gee, our clients know everything about staffing. But most buyers of staffing that we run across, their perception is that staffing is very expensive, more costly than other things that they are doing, and that the quality is often not there. You need to really educate them about the fact that, no, you can deliver greater quality, here's how, and you can deliver incredible value and demonstrate the return on that investment. And supporting what Linda said, Ryan talked about creating an organizational voice. You have to market yourself consistently and effectively through all channels, web, social media, email, direct. But the real thing is taking it to your sales team, taking it to your service team. If you don't have a go-to-market strategy where they're brought in and they understand the organizational voice, you're going to have this disconnect between your marketing and your sales message. I've seen it as bad as the people on the front lines who answer the phones have no idea what the company's marketing message is, no idea what the positioning is, and therefore they're not handling clients the right way because they don't know how to treat them based on the corporate mission, vision, values, and positioning. You need to make sure everybody in the firm knows exactly how you want to be seen, and that how you want to be seen message drives how you act at all levels of the organization. Next up is Vicki, our COO and one of our process gurus here at Haley Marketing, and her advice was to really improve the candidate intake process and experience. We see a lot of issues where it's incredibly difficult for someone to apply for a job. your candidates have choices where they can go work. If your application process is hard, too many steps, they're going to abandon it and leave. I know a lot of staffing software requires lengthy forms to be filled out in order to get into the system. Well, instead of making that step 1, make that step 2. Instead, maybe just to have them submit a resume in response to a job, and then if you're interested, email them the link to the full application. You have to make the process easy for the candidate. You have to make sure that the process you're using today is still correct for your own systems. You have to make sure that process is optimized for mobile. And then you also want to make sure there are elements, and she used a term that we're very fond of here, share-worthy service that's so good people want to tell others about it. Are there elements of share-worthy service built into your communication points with your clients and candidates? If you look at why candidates complain about staffing, the number one complaint is lack of communication from my recruiter. So you want to look at that whole intake, onboarding, and candidate experience management process and say, how do we make the experience, the communication, the service so good our candidates have to tell their friends about it, because that will drive more referrals. Next up is Maggie, one of our social media marketing advisors, and her advice was to budget more for content marketing. Now, the reason that Maggie had this advice is that the statistic I gave earlier, B2B companies that invest in content marketing generate 54% more leads than those that don't. It's simple. If you provide useful content to people that they find interesting and relevant, more people are going to come to you, more people are going to want to talk to you, more people are going to do business with you. Many of you may have seen Jennifer Lambert from Terra Staffing do a webinar for us last summer called Making It Rain. And if you haven't seen it, there's a great recording available on our website. But Jennifer talks about how nearly half of their new business comes from inbound lead generation, and it's content marketing that drives that. And it is less expensive to use content to drive more people to your sales team than it is to hire another salesperson. Staffing firms that invest in blogging see an average increase in web traffic of more than 250%. When it comes to selling your services, Maggie had a great point here, you're not competing just for the sales. You're really competing for people's time, attention, and trust. Great content is the key to getting their time, attention, and building trust. And from Kelly, who is one of our project managers, and very appropriate for project management, have a plan. There are so many staffing firms that have no annual marketing plan. What do you want to accomplish next year? What are your business goals, and how will you create a marketing plan to support those goals? What is the strategy behind your marketing to help you drive more leads, to help you nurture relationships, to help your sales team boost productivity? And what is your budget for accomplishing your goals? How much would you be willing to spend to hit all those goals on your list? When business is slower, we always advise people ramp up marketing, because that's how you're going to get out of the downturn fastest, because you're top of mind when everybody else pulls back and disappears. When business is booming, you still want to be top of mind, because your clients, they're busy too. And more often than not, they're going to go with whatever company that they have a relationship with or that they think of first. And your goal is to make your organization the one they constantly think of first. Marketing is the cheapest, fastest, easiest way to stay top of mind. And in your plans, be flexible, allowing room in your budget so that you can respond to some last-minute opportunities. Like maybe you'll see an event that you hadn't thought about attending that you want to go to. Or maybe you'll get an idea for testing pay-per-click advertising. Leave some room. Don't spend every dollar in your budget so that you can react to those last-minute opportunities. And also, be social. Have some type of social presence, and most companies have built a Facebook page and a Twitter page, and they're on LinkedIn, but not that many staffing companies are truly social. They're not working enough to engage people, to interact with people, to listen, to learn, to communicate, to deal with happy and unhappy candidates. I'm going to talk more about that in a minute from one of the other people who had some advice, but one of the most important communication channels is the one you have available for free, social media, and you want to learn more about how to leverage and maximize your social channel in 2014. Next up is Rob, another one of our project managers, and he had some very concise bullet points. Focus on the ACA. Leverage it to drive more conversations with employers, which is what we talked about earlier. Get your website mobile. The fact is we still see lots of staffing companies that have no mobile solution, and if 30% or more of the people you want to place are trying to find you on a smartphone, you need to have a way for them to engage with you right from their phone wherever they are. Blog. Maggie said it, Rob's saying it. It's a consistent message from our team because it is one of the few things that we have seen that 100% of the time drives more traffic. Now, it's not just about blogging. It's really about thinking about the conversion process, but the blog itself will get more people to your website. Once we get them to the site, then we have to think about how do we convert them into candidates we can place who are applying for jobs and employers that we can work with to help them with their hiring needs. And lastly, and to answer one of the questions that came in, redo your SEO approach. Many of you may have seen there were some major changes with Google over the last few years. A penguin, a panda, and a hummingbird. They like all these animals. Penguin and panda were really about the fact that content matters more than keywords. It's about having the right content that people are searching for. That's still the keyword part, so keyword didn't go away. But the content that really is useful to people, Google gives you tons of credit for. That's why blogging is so important. But this last update was called Hummingbird, and Google did a nasty thing. Google said, we're not going to tell you the keywords people are using to search for your content anymore, to search for your website, unless they're logged into a Google account. Now, we think that's kind of self-serving and that Google really wants to sell more Google AdWords. But from an SEO perspective, you no longer have access to the information that we had just 3 and 4 months ago. What does that mean? Well, we really need to focus on understanding the audience, understanding the profile of the people that are coming to your site. You need to really look at that Google Analytics to see what topics, what pages are being most visited, so you understand what's important to people and you create more content around the things that are important to people. Our typical client will see traffic from thousands of different keywords. So having a website with 20 pages is almost futile if you think about trying to optimize for thousands of keywords. The goal with SEO isn't to be number one, and if you hear from those schlock SEO companies that say, hey, we'll get you to page 1 of Google, run. That's not the goal. The goal, you do want to rank highly for search engines, don't get me wrong, but what you really want to do is see an ever-increasing volume of quality traffic coming from search engines, which is about more and more pages being found and optimized, and that's about regularly adding content, not trying to win on 1 or 2 keywords. Your goal is to drive traffic, loads more traffic, and then get those people to convert by thinking of an SEO approach that starts with content and then works with your website to create conversion. And going back to Rob's point about mobile, people have to engage with that content from any type of device. And speaking of mobile, some advice from Todd, who is our Director of Content Marketing and one of our marketing advisors. Todd does a lot of research in email marketing for us, and we have now found that 50% of email opens are being done on a mobile device. Your email must be really mobile friendly. How do you do it? Here's some tips. Make your subject lines short and catchy. They have to stand out when someone's skimming through them while standing in line on their phone. Less is more. Shorter content is better. And I know people like newsletters with tons of content, but you're better off sending little bites, even a little more frequently, than very long, extensive emails. Make it really easy to read. Use soothing colors. Use big print. Use buttons that stand out. Use bold calls to action. And always provide a view as a web page option, so if somebody has to switch from their mobile view and they prefer to see it online, or maybe they can't see the graphics because of how they're getting it, they can jump into a browser and see your emails. Next up is from Brad, who is another of our social media marketing advisors, and he talked about embracing social dialogue. Don't just create a social media account, be active. Social media is about creating conversations with people. It's about speaking to your fans, communicating information, and honestly addressing issues. Don't block people. Talk to them. All the time we hear from companies that are afraid of what people might say on Facebook or Twitter, so they don't want to be there or they want to block comments. That's a bad idea. If people are unhappy, they're still going to go online and they're going to talk about you. They're just not going to do it in a place that you can control, and you'd rather have the conversation happen in your own backyard than somewhere else. If people have something negative to say, take them seriously. If it's a real issue, be honest, be transparent, talk about the issue, acknowledge it, talk about what you're going to do about it through social channels. The people who like you are going to love that you do that, and the people who might not know you are going to appreciate that you're an honest, open organization that's willing to listen. And if it's somebody that's just the stark raving lunatic that you were never going to place, you may say, hey, let's talk privately, we've got some great ideas for you, and then coach them offline on what they might do for themselves, and then make sure they're not on your email list so that you're mailing them in the future. Next up is Kyle, another of our social media marketing advisor. And Kyle was really talking about using social as an amplification tool. A lot of companies have great content on their website or in a blog, but they're not doing enough to amplify it. They're not getting involved with the entire team sharing content, particularly in LinkedIn, but also on Twitter, on Facebook, and depending on your candidate base, other tools. Your entire team should be regularly sharing. It's as easily as click some of those buttons right in the blog to Google +1 it or like it. Get more people who are talking about your content, the higher the relevancy, the more you're going to show up in Google searches, and the more people are going to see it on Facebook, because both Google and Facebook look at volume of social sharing to determine relevancy. And then Kyle's second piece of advice was to be more conscious about lead generation and proactively plan how your marketing will help you develop leads. Many staffing firms don't realize the power of great content and marketing together, and if you can use content to answer the key questions your clients and candidates have, you can get them to come to your website. You can intentionally drive people to specific web pages, and you can use those pages to drive actions. Think of it like a funnel. How do we go from step A to B to C to place an order? Then you look at your Google Analytics on the back end to see, are we really getting people to step through the funnel the way we want? And next up is Kathy, who is one of our copywriters. And Kathy's advice was to be consistent. We too often see staffing firms where we have one message being said in this brochure and another message being said in that brochure, and the sales teams with a different message. All of your materials need to have a consistent look, a consistent feel, a consistent voice. Focus on being a thought leader. Pick some area that's important to your clients and constantly be sharing information about that particular topic. People want to deal with companies that are experts in something. The more you can be seen as an expert, the more you will drive employers and job seekers to want to work with you. You want to be the one that first comes to mind. You want to be the one they say, oh yeah, Bob Smith, he's the guy who's the legal staffing expert. Not Bob Smith, I think he works for some staffing firm. And lastly, be concise, be mobile, be everywhere. People are busy. Keep what you send short. Make your website easy to navigate for busy people. But give them something of value in return for their time. Make sure they can find you on the fly wherever they are. And that means make sure that also have clear calls to action, clear use of facts, and easy to share information. And from Jenny, who is a social media marketing advisor and our in-house pay-per-click advertising expert. Embrace social proactively. Blogging for specific markets, specific areas. Think about SEO and blogging tied together in terms of your goals. Think about social and blogging and SEO all in conjunction with one another. How do we own certain things in our local market or our industry? Be using Google Places and Google Plus to make sure that you are really sharing content with the right audience and optimizing your site for your local market. And also be monitoring your reputation on all the social sharing sites so that you know when something is said about you. If someone complains on Yelp, you're going to get a notification. You're going to be able to deal with it. If they're on Facebook complaining, the same thing. You know what's going on and you can respond. And Jenny's recommendation is to look at adding pay-per-click advertising to your marketing mix. You can use remarketing, which is a type of pay-per-click advertising where your ads literally follow people who have been to your website as they travel around other sites on the internet. You're constantly in front of them with remarketing. You can use traditional search PPC so that when someone is doing a Google search for a staffing company in your town or a specific type of job, you can be advertising to that person right at the top of the page. And then also social PPC on LinkedIn and Facebook to specifically go after very targeted demographics. Facebook, one of the things we love to do is you may have a giant candidate list that you can't send emails to because you don't have permission from everybody. Well, on Facebook, you can upload that candidate list and you can only target with your sponsored posts, your sponsored status updates, only target those people who are on your email list. So you're going after a very tight audience. We've just done this with a company in IT staffing. They couldn't email their huge list of 70,000 former contractors because they didn't have permission. But we found nearly 20,000 of them on Facebook, and now we're engaging with tens of thousands of people every month on Facebook when we couldn't reach them through any other channel. LinkedIn's another great tool because if you're doing highly targeted marketing, you can go after specific companies and people with your pay-per-click advertising. And if you want to know more about PPC, give us a call. We'll be happy to explain more about all of these different ways to use PPC in more detail. I think we're also going to be doing a webinar on this next year. And lastly, from Mandy, who is our content manager and one of our writers, she talked about mastering social recruiting. We've had a lot of recruiting advice. We've had a lot of social media advice. Mandy put them all together, and she really talked about having a solid social recruiting strategy. What do you want to accomplish? What channels are going to be best for your business? What resources are you willing to allocate in terms of time and money? How are you first going to build a social audience? Get people to follow you. PPC can be great for that. How will you appeal to job seekers? You got to do more than just share jobs. And who is going to be responsible for managing your social recruiting process? You also need to think beyond recruiting. It's not just about a recruiter sharing jobs and doing direct recruiting, although those things are important. It's about thinking about engaging human beings. It's that human brand concept I mentioned earlier, so that you get people to really like and want to do business with your firm. And it's about training your staff. Being 20-something is not a qualification for being good at social media. Having specific training in recruiting, having an understanding of the ins and outs of the social tools, and then really training on what your company is trying to accomplish, that's what it takes. Invest in teaching people how to use the tools. Experiment on your own. There isn't a book written on how to do every one of these things. You're going to have to try things. Some will work, some will fail. That's why you have to measure the results and continue to invest in the things that are proving to be effective. And social recruiting is not a one-time shot like throwing a classified ad used to be. It's really an ongoing process of regular and consistent communication in a way that builds your brand, improves your company's visibility, and makes you be seen as an organization that people want to work with. Thank you to everybody on the team for sharing such great ideas, and thank you to everybody on the call for sticking with us a little over our intended hour, but there were just so many ideas I didn't want to cut it off. If there are questions, please feel free. I will stay online and answer them if you want to use the GoToWebinar, or call us. You can reach us at 888-696-2900. Please feel free to email me directly, dcearns@haleymarketing.com, or reach out to me on Twitter or our company on Twitter or Facebook. We would love to hear from you, and we would love to share more ideas. And lastly, to wrap things up, this is going to be our last webinar of 2013. And beginning in January, we're jumping right in with our next Lunch with Haley. And Kyle Denoff, who you saw on our list of tip givers today, is going to be leading a webinar on social media marketing and really the science of social and things you can do beyond what you're hearing from most people about using social media. It's going to be a great webinar. Kyle does a lot of our really advanced experimentation and R&D work with social technology, and I think you're going to really enjoy what he has to share. And from all of us at Haley Marketing Group, we hope you're having a terrific holiday season, and we hope you have a very happy, healthy, and safe New Year, and we look forward to seeing you on Lunch with Haley's in 2014.